Oh, we're live. There we go. This time from different sides of the ocean. Scott is in Israel,
Hello,
I'm in Costa
hello.
Rica. I wanted to stream this from outside, but then yesterday I realized that it randomly starts raining, and when it rains so hard that you want to swim instead of running back. Anyways, it's all about your questions. Ask anything. We already have a couple of questions, so we're going to start moving right away into those questions. First one from Akiva. Moving away from Docker Compose, Scott talked a few weeks ago about Dev Containers plus Tilt. Would you please share best practices and helpful tips? Would I write a separate for each microservice? I guess separate Tilt configuration. So Scott, fire away. This is a question for you.
Yeah. So the answer is I'm happy to, reach out to me on the Ether out there, vRabbi, on different platforms, Kubernetes, Slack, whatever, and happy to give more info. But in general, the answer is you will have small differences between the tilt files of different microservices as well as the dev containers based off of what's actually needed for each microservice. But those are easy to lay out. And that's where something like backstack software templates is really like the ultimate way, I think, down the road. If you move down the IDP approach, would be, templating those out and they get created for each microservice. But I think for sure it's a unique tilt file because the dependencies that you need for each app is going to be different. Something needs Redis, another thing needs Postgres, and another thing needs these three microservices deployed from within them. You can look at snippets in Tilt that you can bring in remote configurations as well, which is very beneficial. So that if a microservice is dependent on another one, you can actually just like remote reference the other Tilt file and make things work. It has some complexities, but that's definitely the approach that I would take.
Okay, let's go to the next one. From Yuri, Kubernetes in cloud, is it common to have a self-managed control plane? I don't know the numbers, I don't have the data in front of me, but from personal experience, the answer is big no. Everybody I know that uses cloud providers, cloud vendors like AWS, Azure, Google, most of them, if not all, are using managed control planes. It's just, I don't see the advantage of having your own
Yeah.
control planes.
So there's a few use cases of having your own control planes, I think. It always start with the managed, and if it isn't what you want, then you go to the self-managed. You always want to start with the managed solutions, I think, as much as possible if cost isn't the issue. Now, where cost becomes the issue with the hosted is not the price of EKS versus running three EC2 instances that run etcd and all of that, because I'm not sure that's even any more expensive, more expensive to run EKS than that. Real challenge comes to, for example, EKS have very specific ways of auditing is enabled or audit logs are disabled. And if they're enabled, they get sent to CloudWatch. That is very expensive. So if you're in a highly regulated environment that needs to be cost conscious, maybe EKS is going to be way too expensive for you, and going with a managed control plane, you can send to an S3 bucket, you can fine tune the better for you, right? So it really is going to come down to those little details. The only other use case for self-managed is if you are multi-cloud, right? You really run on multiple clouds, on-premise, on all of that. Sometimes having the same distribution across it, especially when, different clouds will have different support cycles for Kubernetes releases. Now, that's typically where something like I would never recommend doing do-it-yourself Kubernetes in the cloud. What I would say is that if you're not going to go with EKS, go with a Rancher, Spectro Cloud, Cluster API, KubeADM, uh, Platform 9. I don't care what tool it is, but you can use a tool that Fleet manages for you. That's the only way to do it if you're not doing managed control planes. Don't do a do-it-yourself, kubeadm in it.
I would add that I think that smaller providers are underrated. I mean, to be honest, I would always run on Azure or AWS or Google rather than Linode or Hetzner or something like that. But if the main kind of problem is the cost, I would seriously consider using managed Kubernetes in a cheaper provider than running it yourself. Assuming that you don't have special requirements and things like that. I'm not saying that they are as good, just to be clear, but hey, managed over there might be a better option than you fiddling with your own setup and everything.
Yes, except that then I don't get IRSA or pod identity. And I don't get like all of these things, like then I'm not plugged into the AWS ecosystem. So if you're tied into the AWS ecosystem, then you have a huge loss there, right? So like that's where the self-managed would come in, I think. It's like,
sure,
if you're not tied to AWS and you're literally, databases are in Kubernetes, everything in Kubernetes, I don't care about integration with the cloud. Go with, the Civos, Linodes, of the world, or UpCloud, your new favorite, it seems. Right?
Yeah.
Why not?
And I'm not sure about favorite, but they're an option. Okay, next one is somehow similar yet not the same. What do you think about building my own cluster with K3s on Hetzner professional environments? I'm pretty sure that Scott has a lot of thoughts on. My short version is that I don't think that K3s is a thing unless we are talking about edge devices or something like that, something that is really underpowered. And I definitely don't like the idea of building your own cluster, especially if there is an option of managed cluster, except in cases like what Scott mentioned before, kind of, hey, I have cost is an issue or special requirements or what's not. But if it's just for the sake of building it, don't build your own cluster. And I'm not sure about Hetzner, but I would be surprised that Hetzner doesn't have a managed solution as well.
Yeah. And all I will say is K3s belongs on a Raspberry Pi and nothing bigger.
Exactly. Okay.
Not even your laptop. That's where kind is used.
Exactly. Okay, so Johnny, this is Scott will have a lot of comments on this one, I'm pretty sure, and he will make an angry face. My company is evaluating OpenShift to support cloud-native development for our on-prem teams. What alternatives would you recommend? What alternatives to OpenShift? I know that VMware Tanzu is not an alternative anymore in my book, so that would be those that you mentioned previously, right? Kind of ranchers of the world.
Right. So if you are a VMware shop, meaning you are a VVF, VCF, now the new licensing model, you're a vSphere shop, the answer is you get VKS, the VMware Kubernetes service, which isn't Tanzu anymore. It's now part of the actual software-defined data center, the actual core business of VMware, at which point you get that for free. So you get a managed Kubernetes offering for free as part of vSphere. So if you are a vSphere shop, it's worth looking at that to see if that suffices your needs, because it has a lot of capabilities and it's actually a very good decision. That's option one if you're just looking for vSphere and that's what you run on. Great. If you need more flexibility, you want to run on bare metal, you want to run on Nutanix, you want to run on CloudStack, OpenStack, also VMware, but you want that flexibility, that's where my personal favorite, and I think the best, the creme de la creme, is SpectroCloud. If you're looking for something on the open source side, it would be probably, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it would have to be Rancher, just because it is open source. As much as I don't like RKE2 and I do not like their bastardization of Cluster API, I prefer things that actually use the projects in the correct way in my mind, the standard way. And it works in the cloud as well as on-prem and supports probably the most infrastructure providers. So I would look at Rancher as a best option.
Okay, now I had alarm ringing because I always forget to mention Codefresh. They're sponsoring this stream. So thank you, Codefresh, for sponsoring. Everybody, if you want to try it out, type GitOps 2025 and you will get a 20% discount. And why Codefresh? Codefresh is for essentially people who like Argo CD. If you like Argo CD and you want end-to-end solution, not only Argo CD alone, then you might want to try it out. It's the thing that I really like about it, without giving up praise because it's a sponsor, is that they're combining Argo CD with promotions, and then basically and there are also some workflows over there, so you get end-to-end solution where you essentially connect your Argo CD to them, then you annotate your application so that Codefresh knows that they should do something. You define the environments, dev, prod, staging, whatever you're having. You create the flows, how things will be promoted from one environment to another, and then you just go in and watch it run, right? Start promoting stuff. So thank you, Codefresh, for sponsoring this stream. That's absolutely awesome. Everybody, codefresh.io, GitOps 2025 for a discount. And let's go back to questions. If I only see, where were we? I already forgot. Okay, here we go. From Hussein. Is it now considered safe and production ready to run PostgreSQL on Kubernetes, for example, using Cloud Native PG? Yes. Oh, look at that. That's a fact that I did not want to create. But there we go. It is kind of, we are not in the early stages of Kubernetes. I know quite a lot of
especially now that CNPG is a CNCF project.
Yeah. And to me, before even kind of thinking about CNPG, first one is to make a mental decision. Kind of, you can run stuff in Kubernetes that is not only the typical deployment service and so on and so forth. And you should be using operators to do your stuff. And once you make that decision, then if you're talking about PostgreSQL, CNPG is absolutely awesome. Okay, this is something I don't know much about. I don't know about you, Scott. So how would you shift to AI, ML, LLM tech look like, and what are top use cases you came across or challenges we can make use of AI, ML in DevOps SRE domain? What challenges AI, ML, agentic AI would fail in SRE? I've been using it. So I had very negative opinion about AI basically till the end of last year. I think that it was just too often wrong, right? The moment that agents became decent or good, the story changed, right? Because now it's not only about models, it is about agents that are capable of using those models. And then if you connect that to SMP servers, then you get something that is much better, right? I wouldn't start firing everybody, just to be 100% clear. I think that we are getting into the phase that they are helpful as long as the person who is behind it knows what he or she is doing. I still don't think that agents plus MLs, plus models plus MCPs are good to just let them run wild with very junior people, right? But if you know what you're doing, if you can understand, if you can detect when it makes a mistake, then it's very, very useful, right? From writing code to asking it questions. Like only this morning before this stream, I was working on it with a cluster with questions like, hey, what's wrong with it? Can you explain it to me? Things like that. It's very useful, but they're still hallucinating and they're still confidently giving you wrong answers. Less than before with agents, but still. So don't give it to a junior people and say, push to production.
Absolutely not. But it's one of the big things also, don't hide it from people. Meaning,
yes.
like, you have to, if you're allowed to use AI within the organization, you need to let everyone use AI, but it needs to be used responsibly, and it needs to be checked, and it needs to be triple and quadruple verified, right? Like it's not about using or not using, it's about how to use it in a smart way. And we need to teach people how to do that.
Yeah, and also, I was making mistakes before that I was giving it too much to do. If you split it into small chunks, which I believe you should be doing without AI, by the way. If you split it into smaller chunks, if you end every relatively small session with, create a PR for me, and then somebody can check it out before it is merged to the mainline. Then no matter whether we're talking about scripts or code or whatever else, it's fine. It's good. I'm starting to really like it. Okay, wait. Oh, we have from Akiva, $5. Thanks a ton. I really appreciate it. What else? Where were we? Okay. This is, since I'm an Argo CD more than a Flux guy and Scott is Flux guy, I will let him answer. And then I'm going to say that he's wrong. Maybe. Who knows? Anyway, I learned recently that Flux CD is slowly going away because the things that happened with vWorks. Is that true that Argo CD is now the de facto standard and I should learn it as the main GitOps tool? Now, okay, so let me split that question. There is a question of opinion, what is better? And there is a question whether it's a standard. Standards are not always better. I'm just limiting Scott right now.
Correct. Yes. So the first part we will agree on, which is Flux CD is better from a technological, architectural, everything perspective, except that it doesn't come with a UI, right? Which we know that Victor loves his UIs, right? But like beyond the not having a built-in UI, Flux CD is a better tool. I think period, end of story from a technological perspective. Now, from that comes to things of like, we don't member secret, we use the Kubernetes RBAC system, like everything is actually like the way it should be in Kubernetes. And it is actually more contributed to now than it was back when WeWorks were still around towards the end. It's very active.
Oh, I think we lost Scott, or I lost connection and I cannot see Scott. I don't know which one of the two it is. Let me know in the comments. I don't know whether it's my connection or Scott's connection. One of the two of us is going wild here. Okay, so probably Scott is gone, I guess, from the comment from work. Okay, I'll jump to the next question until Scott is back. Look at that. Scott is back, and I'm going to remove
my internet. My internet crashed there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So Flux CD is not going away. Flux CD still is very active. There was a slow period when WeWorks, went under. That it was kind of in limbo land, but it has gained a new community and new interest and all of that. Now, if I will be honest here and say, yes, Argo CD is more widely adopted today than Flux CD. I think that is very clear, and I think that you'd have to be blind not to admit that. I think that what really needs to be understood in like when you're choosing in between the tools, I think is very simple. It's the same question of should you use Knative or not. The whole question comes to, is Argo CD / Flux CD your user interface or not? Or is it a part of a platform? If it's a implementation detail of your platform, choose Flux CD because it is much more composable and easy for you to build something around. If it is the user interface, then the application CR actually of Argo CD is going to give a nicer, a more streamlined UX for your end user. It all comes down to what your end user, what is the interface to your platform? Have you wrapped around that, at which point Flux CD will be better for you? That's why like VMware, Azure, AWS, all implemented Flux CD inside of their platforms because it is much more composable and better to use. If it's your front end, Argo CD makes sense. The same thing goes with like Knative, where I say if it's an implementation detail, there are better things than Knative at every single thing that it does. But if you want to just offer a simple user interface for your user and Knative suffices you, it's much better than having a user go and create a deployment, a service, an ingress, a secret, a da-da-da-da-da. So, like, that's the same story I would say with Flux and Argo. And I will never choose Argo.
You might eventually. Who knows?
I'll choose Rancher Fleet first.
Okay, now I understand that you're not going to choose Argo CD or Flux. I give you that. But now you went too far. I think, no, you went too far. If Argo CD and Fleet are the only two choices, I cannot imagine a world in which you would choose Fleet. I'm sorry.
Out of spite.
Out of spite. From Ticho, something like that. What do you think about the umbrella Helm chart? Is the good practice? I'm working with the umbrella chart containing 14 other charts. To me, seems too complex. What other alternatives are? My 2 cents before I let Scott go right. First, I don't like the attempts where people try to create one thing that works for everybody. With the idea that you avoid repeating yourself, but then you create such a complexity on the other side that you might realize that actually repeating yourself every once in a while is okay. Now, the alternative, especially in this case, is create CRDs and controllers, right? If you want to serve different people's needs, then create CRDs and controllers, and then you manage things in one place, which is your cluster, and then you let people deal what is equivalent to Helm values on their end, right? So to me, alternative, especially in that scenario, is CRDs and controllers. Switch tools, it can be crossplane, project I'm involved in, it can be Kubevela, it can be Crow, it can be, there are dozens of others, right? So if you're looking for alternative, I don't think you should look for alternative that does the same thing. Look for alternative elsewhere, and that's Kubernetes itself.
Yeah. So again, me and Victor both have the same opinion about Helm. But I will say there is one use case where umbrella charts is the correct approach in my mind, which is if you're a vendor building a solution that you want to offer your customers, that is where an umbrella chart is the way to go. Because if you need for your product Postgres, and you need Redis, and you need Elastic, and you need so you have your Helm chart that brings in all of these dependencies, and you build your umbrella chart above all of these and whatever. That is a great approach if you are creating a product. For internal, you should never use Helm, but if you're using Helm, you should not be doing umbrella charts. We have to understand that Kubernetes has the idea of eventual consistency, and we need to let that work. We need to adopt the Kubernetes practice to actually gain the benefits from Kubernetes, and these ideas of wrapping it all together breaks that. The other thing is, even if you aren't, and you want to do dependency management and whatnot, CI pipeline / CD pipeline / whatever are going to do a much better job at that and have much more fine-grained tooling and are more appropriate than doing that in a Helm chart. So if you need to order the deployment of these different things, do that in a GitHub Actions / in, whatever it is, it's going to do the deployment or the pushes to Git or the whatever it is, do staggered rollouts, figure that out from a CD perspective, not within the Helm chart itself.
And even and I agree that first embrace Kubernetes of eventual consistency. Most of the time, not always, but most of the time you don't need ordered stuff. But even if you do order stuff and you create separate charts, let's say PostgreSQL database and application, right? And some Q nuts. Right. I don't think that it's so difficult to explain to people, and people already know that. Okay, so I should create a database first before application. I don't think that umbrella chart is the answer to that, kind of only because people don't understand that database should be created. And I'm now ignoring eventual consistencies if it doesn't exist, right? So even without CI pipelines, which I agree, you should use CI pipelines, but even without them, it's not a problem. Kind of just give people logical. The way I always think about those things is create logical units, right? If an application will always have PostgreSQL database, baked PostgreSQL into application definition, whichever technology you're using, right? If you want to let people choose whether they should use PostgreSQL or SQL or MySQL or nuts with application, separate charts are fine, perfectly fine, and you just save yourself from headache of having zillion loops and conditionals and complexity.
It's better to It's easier to maintain a bash script that would just do the multiple Helm installs as well than to create the umbrella chart. So it's like, just give a bash script for people that need that to, that does the right order, that has 3 prompts at the beginning using like gum or whatever to like have pretty UI. Or use new shell if you're, one of the 3 people along with Victor that use it.
No, it's 5 of us now.
Wow. You've almost doubled. You've almost doubled.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? Like, but create a bash script. That's better than an umbrella chart. Unless you are a vendor, in which case only do umbrella chart, because that's the unfortunate situation we're in as an industry, is that Helm is the de facto standard.
When it comes to vendor, everything I said was for your own stuff. When it comes to vendors, I freak out when I see examples, in documentation. Oh, install this chart and then apply this separate manifest for ingress that is required for the thing that is in that chart. Or examples like that. No. You're a vendor, you give a product, that's a single chart, period, for a product, not necessarily for a suite of products.
Have you tried to install self-hosted Pixie before, Victor?
So I tried with the chart, I gave up, and then I went with, I don't remember the command, Pixie install or something like that.
Yeah, but I'm saying even that only installs with their SaaS UI. Try to install Pixie Cloud, which is like if you want to self-host the UI, there's said MK cert customize. It's like 75 steps. Git checkout of a specific commit that you figure out through a Perl script. No.
Only a few hours ago, actually, I sent semi-angry email to one of the projects I'm not going to name that asked me, can you check this out, right? Some operator for something, doesn't matter, right? And the instructions were like that, kind of, hey, clone this repo, and then, or no need to clone, you can use raw files from this repo, and then install this, and then install that. And then if you use Ingress, then download this file and change this. That's a single Helm chart. If it's not a single Helm chart, that's what I told them, kind of like, until I get the chart, I'm not touching this. Period. The end of the story. Okay, I'm not this much into it, so I don't know the answer. I don't know about Scott. And the question is, I saw that only Gateway API implementation that support TCP UDP routes are Envoy Gateway and Kong. Any experience with those?
So I have a bit of experience with Envoy Gateway. There are also commercial ones that support TCP. I'm not sure about UDP, but like NSX Advanced Load Balancer supports TCP. I don't think it supports UDP yet. I think that the F5 one also supports TCP, if I remember correctly. But the answer is I have used Envoy Gateway a bit. I think that it is a very good project. What I liked about Envoy Gateway is also that the teams from Contour and many other basically all of the Envoy-based ingresses came together and collaborated on Envoy Gateway as like the baseline for Envoy-based Gateway API. So it has a lot of community interest, and it has a lot of experts from multiple projects that collaborated together, which I think brought the expertise from a lot of places. I don't know why. I can't give an answer, but I never connected to Kong. And I can't put my finger on why I didn't connect to Kong as an ingress controller either. There's nothing wrong with it. It never clicked for me why I would choose Kong. Envoy Gateway is what I would choose, but I think Kong is a safe bet also. It has users, it has a user base. It just never has clicked with me.
Okay, from Johnny. Now that Grafana has planned to stop support for OnCall OSS, are there any other valid Kubernetes native IRM solutions you would recommend? I will comment actually on the first part. I don't think that anybody should expect on-call support from any open source without paying for it. I'm not sure whether that was a paid service, and I don't think that there is. I mean, I've been in companies that were providing support for projects, and it's very, very difficult to provide support to open source. And the reason is simply because I don't know which version you installed. I don't know how to. I mean, there are so many variations that giving support to just, I installed Grafana is very, very hard. And in almost all cases I was in, we made the decision, okay, we're going to give you our own distribution, no matter whether it's just curated open source or it is with some enterprise features, and we know what you're running, and we are in a way almost forcing you to run the right thing so that we can support you in that. So I don't know about the details, what Grafana is doing now with on-call and open source, but that decision does not sound surprising or bad, to be honest. And if that was not paid in the past, there is zero reasons to give unpaid support. And if it was paid, I think that it makes perfect sense to say, okay, we can support you in this. This is what we're giving you, not whatever you want type of stuff.
Yeah. I think that on-call solutions are something that you should be paying for. It's one of those things that I always have this, question, and like Victor has talked about this a lot as well, like of what the balance is. A company needs to make money, right? Grafana need to make money, and they should make money because they are doing such amazing things in open source and whatever. They're giving so much to the community. They should be making money as well, right? That's the only way that the open source is going to continue. On-call is not something that a small project needs. It's not something that you necessarily, whatever. That is something that you can pay for when you get to the level where I need the on-call support systems, all of that. That's something you should be paying for as a company. That is a business need of yours, not a underlying technology like monitoring, which they do have open source. Go ahead, use Grafana, use Loki, use all of that. This already becomes a business feature, the on-call, at which point that should be a paid service. I'm shocked that there was even an open source one, and I think that it shouldn't have existed. I don't think that it's a good idea to have that as open source. Like, as much as I'm a huge open source fan, but I believe that this type of stuff is what needs to be commercial. And it can be fairly priced commercial, but commercial.
And, without entering into other alternatives, alternative to Grafana is Grafana open source. You can use it, you just don't get support. And there are forums, probably Slacks and Discords and what's not. There are other people who are using Grafana, and it's a big community, can help each other, but it's not whenever you need it with any guarantee. So I don't think, if somebody doesn't want to pay for support, that somebody doesn't have to look for alternative. You might look for alternatives to Grafana for other reasons, but if support is if you're looking because of the support, well, just keep using Grafana. It has a community. People will answer your questions. There is just no guarantee when, right?
Right. Exactly.
Okay. From Michael, after watching your video about Crow, I'm wondering at what scale it makes sense to start migrating to custom operators and orchestration instead of templating with Helm, YTT, KCL, etcd. I have a radical opinion on that one, and I would say that on any scale that is appropriate for Kubernetes. We can have a discussion at which scale you shouldn't maybe even using Kubernetes, but I would say on any scale. Now, depending on the scale, you might choose one solution or another. Like Crow is probably the easiest one right now, right? So on a small scale, Crow is probably a good option. If you need more, you will have additional complexity and get more with Crossplane, right? There is Kubevela, but when you look at Crow, and I'm just going to use Crow as example here because it's mentioned in the question. When you look at Crow, it's not at all more complicated to define stuff than Helm chart. And this, again, I'm excluding you being a vendor here from the story, right? Now, maybe if you're very small, I have one application kind of, or if everybody in your company knows what they're doing with Kubernetes, maybe not.
So here, like, I also think that this is mixing two things, because the question is what you mean by custom operators and orchestration, right? Custom operators meaning going and building something with, Cube Builder.
No.
Like, no. Like, that is for very specific use cases where if you're managing, for example, a data source that needs weird, like, special migrations in, like, Cloud Native Postgres, which knows how to deal with the upgrade of a version of Postgres, which needs to talk to the Postgres API to do... Okay, fine. Like, that is something that anyways you couldn't solve with YTT, KCL, Helm, any of that, so that I'm taking out of the picture. Anything else should be done with things like Crossplane, for example, I think, within the cluster. Now, what I will say is, though, is that those are not, well, Crossplane is not at odds with Helm, YTT, KCL. Rather, you use the Go templating within Crossplane. You use YTT within Crossplane. You use KCL within Crossplane. The whole difference here is building just that extra abstraction layer above and moving the templating to be cluster server side instead of being client side. So it's not a question of operator versus templating. It's client side versus server side. That's the whole debate here. I will say that I have a bit of a differing opinion from Victor because I think of when that point is, because I think there is a point where Kubernetes is a necessity, but the skill set within the company is not there to maintain something like Crossplane or Crow, which does add a lot of complexity from the platform engineer perspective of understanding and whatever. The onboarding ramp is much harder than client-side Helm apply. And therefore, I think that it really comes down to that, which is if your team is able to bring on the mental model of a tool like Crossplane, do Crossplane. I personally want to see Crow succeed because I want to see more tools in this area succeed. I personally could not recommend Crow due to certain limitations in it right now. I hope that this changes, and I know they're working on them, but some of the limitations in Crow today, I can't recommend Crow for any use case, even small ones today. I love Kubevela and their approach, even though I don't use them. I like Cradix, even though I don't use them. I could recommend both those in different use cases. Crossplane is what I personally love. Crow, I can't recommend yet. There are just too many issues at this point. It's in alpha also, which is why people have to stop being so judgmental when projects are also in alpha. It's alpha on purpose because it's out there to get initial input, and it will grow and it will mature and it will become a project that hopefully, gives a real fight to Crossplane and just grows the idea of control planes, and the ecosystem will be healthy and good because of that. But Crossplane is the only solution I think today to really solve this at scale. And Crossplane is a large mental model that you have to go through. So the question is if you can accept that. If you can, do it. Otherwise, use Helm, YTT, KCL, but do it with a mindset of I want to move to server side down the road. So build it in a way that understand Crossplane, theoretical. Watch Victor's 10 videos that he's done on Crossplane. It'll take you 3 hours. Watch them. understand the mental model. From that point on, just do Helm charts, YTT, KCL, whatever it is, but with the mental model of crossplane in the back of your mind. At that point, when you are ready to make that move, it will be much easier.
I feel that your answer is similar to one potential answer about previous questions of databases, right? I could probably translate what you just said to databases. Kind of, should you run databases in Kubernetes? Yes, but
if you have the expertise.
Exactly, you have the expertise. You're already proficient enough with Kubernetes and the models and what's not, right?
Right.
The next one from I cannot pronounce Raja Seelan, maybe. What happened to code, Victor? I'm not sure what that
Code
means.
Victor for CodeFresh, for the sponsor of this.
No. So there were different things before. They were sponsoring the training, and now they're sponsoring their platform, and now it's a different code. That's all I know. I don't know more. Ask them. From Noam, I saw
We
that
read
the
this
only
one.
gateway. Did I? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Then it's repeated. How is the industry testing Kubernetes and crossplane system? Is there an equivalent of Terraform plan people are using to visualize production releases? No. There is no. So actually, Upbound as a company, so now we are entering into commercial part of the story, has something similar to a plan, but it's not really a plan. And I'm very skeptical. Crossplane community thinks that they can do it somehow. I'm very skeptical of any of those tools ever having something really like a plan. And the reason why I'm skeptical is that when you run something like Terraform, right, all the decisions are made at that very moment, right? You execute Terraform plan, Terraform needs to figure out everything and tell you, right? When you move into Kubernetes, and that doesn't matter whether we're talking about crossplane, whether we're talking about your pods or anything else, I'm very skeptical that there will ever be a plan because many of the decisions are made afterwards, right? Kind of, oh, I create this resource and then I decide what to do with that resource. And a simple example I have about the inability of the plan is that I never saw anybody, or I think that anybody will ever be able to tell me, for example, where will the pod run before I apply to the cluster, right? Because the decision where it will run is made afterwards by the orchestrator.
Right, but what the plan could tell me, meaning the level of the plan, I agree. But the plan can tell you, and this is what, like, both me and Victor happened to be on the same Zoom call before this on the crossplane, whatever meeting. And the crossplane office hours, one of the things that came up, I think after you dropped, Victor, but was a new CLI idea of crossplane diff, which basically will run the whole crossplane pipeline with your new XR local, so like crossplane render, but against that, and then show me what the diff of the manifests would be that get applied to my cluster. Which managed resources, what the difference is going to be. That's basically plan. It's going to say, hey, these fields are going to change in these 20 resources. Now, what that is going to do in the cloud, or what that is going to mean, it's also a not perfect one, because if in my crossplane composition, let's say I'm changing my VPC, and then I have subnets that are taking some value from the VPC and based off of that are changing, until this applies, the status doesn't change, and until the status doesn't change, the other resource doesn't pull in the new value. So it's kind of a best effort diff, but it still is a lot better than what we have today. It will help. And the other big one that should be coming hopefully in the next release of crossplane, if I understand correctly, is the change logs. So it's not a plan, but the change logs, which were released in 1.17 of crossplane, if I remember my versions correctly, but isn't rolled out to providers yet, is going to be able to give you a way to see what all the changes that were made to cloud resources are from crossplane over time. So it's more of a retroactive thing, but you will be able to see, hey, these changed at this date, and then you can correlate that with your XRs and all of that for like debugging purposes and things like that. So not the same as planned, but in that same idea of trying to understand what changes caused what.
Yeah, I mean, I would summarize it as, you will get more information about things that will happen before they happen. You will get even more information about things that happened after they happened. But I don't think that it will ever go in a direction of giving literally equivalent of Terraform plan, right? And I feel that we need to change the mental model that kind of, before Kubernetes, we were doing everything. Right now, we are delegating part of our work to Kubernetes, right? And it will, as Scott mentioned, we will get more information on different levels. But still, the fact is that we are signing contract with Kubernetes saying, I trust you to do the right thing, right? And things will change over time. And I cannot know in advance or everything that will ever change, right? Even Terraform will not be able to do that for you, right? It's just that we run it. It's almost equivalent of if you would be running Terraform plan and then Terraform apply yourself every 10 minutes, you would get something similar to what those tools are doing, right? But that's not what you're doing.
Right.
Okay. Is Istio with the sidecar still relevant? I'm not following it closely lately, but from what I understand, without sidecar, you're not getting all the features of Istio, right? So it depends on which features you want to enable and which not. But remind me, Scott,
the list is getting much smaller, right?
Yeah,
the list is getting much smaller, meaning what they're able to solve with ambient mesh is a lot more, which is the non-sidecar based model. I am a huge supporter of ambient, of anything that is without sidecars. Sidecars, in many cases, they can double your resources. They can cause huge issues with when you want to upgrade Istio, go ahead and roll out every single application in your cluster so that you get the new sidecar. Like, there are many challenges with the sidecar model I do not like, right? Like, it was much better. It was like we're moving in the right direction because it was the only way to do it back then. And it was much better to have it in a sidecar and need to restart my app than to need to put circuit breakers and TLS and MTLS and all that into my application code. So, like, good. Like, we did that, but I'm past sidecars. That's why I'm not a Linkerd guy or any of that, because they're stuck in the, sidecars are magnificent and we built the best sidecar in the world. And like, no, you're still using a sidecar. No, thank you. So I'm an ambient mesh type person. What I really like that they've done I think it was like a year ago that they started this, but ambient mesh now can work with, like, for everything you can have ambient, and then for the specific applications that need those capabilities, you can add the sidecar. Meaning, like, it can now kind of interoperate the sidecar model with ambient so that you don't need to choose either or. You go with the default of ambient and then add in the capabilities as I need them, which I think is the right approach.
Okay, from Islam. Hello, I need to ask the difference between scaling with HPA or KEDA, or do you recommend any other tool? KEDA.
KEDA. By the way, it's not KEDA or HPA because KEDA uses HPA under the hood. It's just a much smarter wrapper around HPA with many more capabilities.
The only thing that I would add, and I feel that this is similar to some previous answers, is that if you're a newbie with Kubernetes, you might want to go with the HPA and say, okay, let's not complicate, because adding additional layer is always additional level of complication. So maybe not start with the KEDA if you're just starting with Kubernetes, but the end goal, yes, KEDA, 100%. And I don't know of any, if we're talking about only horizontal scaling, I don't know of any alternative worth talking about, except if you want some dashboard that shows you all the resources you're losing, and then we're talking about, those about cost optimization. And there is still work to be done how to make it work with vertical scaling. That's a problem. But if you're talking about horizontal scaling, KEDA is the end goal.
Yeah. For horizontal, the answer is 100% KEDA, unless your use case is so simple that HPA solves it, which at the beginning, when you're just starting with Kubernetes, HPA is going to be fine for you. But once you start to get into the advanced use cases, and that's really where KEDA shines. And vertical scaling is really important, and I think vertical scaling for many years would have been actually better than horizontal, but Kubernetes did not have what we just got released in beta in 133, which is in-place resource updates, where I can now, without restarting my container, I can change the CPU and memory. And obviously that's going to depend on your app, because if you're Java, no, you need to restart the application, because otherwise, the heap memory and all of that, it's not going to be dynamically reallocating itself. But for many languages, that'll work fine, especially CPU. And that's going to be huge, right? I think we're going to see a move towards more and more vertical scaling and less horizontal. I think it's going to be a mixture of the two, but vertical is going to come up massively now that we have in beta the ability to do right sizing of pods without needing to restart them.
I feel that memory CPU, if I limit myself to that, KEDA does much more, right? That's one of the things that engineers never knew how to set up, and I gave up that we will ever know how to set it up. And I can imagine a world in the future where actually we are simply not defining memory and CPU, and kind of just simply, here's my app, scale it vertically, scale it horizontally. And we're not there yet. But in my head, that's the end goal. Kind of like, I'm not dealing with those things.
That's where, like, in my ideal setup, I've tested a bunch of tools in this area. In my mind, the best one is a tool called ScaleOps. But there's ScaleOps, there's Cast AI, there's, 30,000 different, tools out there. But the real benefit is, like, you just bring in a tool like that, and then it'll manage all of that. And once you do that, together with something like Carpenter for optimized node sizing and all of that, so now I get Carpenter to deal with cost-optimized sizing of my nodes. I have something like a ScaleOps, whatever, that is actually setting my requests and limits correctly based off of historical analysis and data and yada yada. And then I bring in KEDA when I need to do specific horizontal scaling based off of, let's say, like amounts of messages in Kafka or in Rabbit or in Redis or whatever, all these different things. And then you have like the best auto scaling. Developers don't need to care. It just like, tell me how many messages you can process at once. Great. Thanks. Have a nice day. And the KEDA, ScaleOps, Carpenter all run together and everything is perfect and no one cares, right? Like, and it's cost optimized continuously. That's the world that I think we're getting towards. And I think we're not far, especially now that we have in-place resource upgrades.
No, now in-place was the critical, because I don't want my application to restart for no good reason. Kind of that just
right. Exactly.
Okay, so from Timo, thanks for great content, Junior here. Thank you for thanking. And without there was seniors in the company, your videos are a source of confidence. Greatly appreciated. Thank you for saying that. Really awesome. Thanks so much. Next, from Johnny, how would you handle multi-region disaster recovery for an EKS cluster? The cluster has stateful applications such as Prometheus, Tempo, and Elasticsearch, and is mostly used for centralized monitoring. Multi-region. The problem is always data with multi-region, kind of, and latency. Kind of that's restoring a cluster is not a problem, right? Especially if
restoring data is.
Yeah, and more often than not, you cannot just stream data across multiple regions, so the data is already freely available. I mean, you can, but it will be very expensive and very slow. And I honestly don't know actually the answer to the question how to do multi-region disaster recovery.
From my perspective, the answer is that this is where you have to bring in a solution such as
Custom.
What's it called? Portworx. to do like Portworx DR specifically, which like is a specific setup for disaster recovery between two clusters. Then you can fail over to a cluster, all of that. Or something like if you're looking more on the open source side, I have heard that Piraeus, I think is what it's called, has that same capability kind of from Linbit. Again, I personally have experience with Portworx and it works great, but it also costs money. So, you know, but my opinion is that when it comes to disaster recovery, that's another one of those things that I think that's usually the thing you do want to pay for, because you want to have the vendor to call when disaster recovery doesn't work. Which is why I think like for something like that, that's where go with Portworx and pay the money, because you want to have 1-800 Pure Storage. I have a failure in the disaster recovery. Come fix now. I don't want to be opening up a GitHub issue. Hi, my production is down. Can someone please help me?
No. Because actually, I like to distinguish. There are imaginary reasons to have multi-region stuff. And there are real reasons, right? When they're real, I cannot imagine a scenario in which you don't pay for that. Kind of that you really have that need. So if you have that need, your real big business, your life depends on it. And then you say, I'm going to go for the open source. My only conclusion is that either you're doing something very silly or you have imaginary needs to do it in the first place.
Exactly. I would also say the one last thing I would say here is something like Elasticsearch. Consider, and again, I'm just saying consider, but sometimes when it comes to data in Kubernetes, if you really need multi-region DR, does it make sense to run it in Kubernetes versus using, let's say, managed OpenSearch from AWS and make them handle it, right? Like sometimes the question of should I be doing it in Kubernetes or not? It's a cost analysis. It's a cost benefit analysis continuously, because the creation of it will always be from Kubernetes in my mind through Crossplane, whether it is running as pods, my Elasticsearch or OpenSearch in my cluster, or I'm using managed OpenSearch. And then say AWS, your issue. Like they deal with the resilience of it. They have to deal with all of that. That may be a better solution for some of these things. And then you've limited the scope of what you have to do disaster recovery. And then do you really need your Prometheus metrics replicated across regions? Because the new pod comes up on the other side.
My brain, until a minute ago, did not compute that there is Prometheus and Tempo and Elasticsearch, which I guess is for logs or something like that. I'm not sure. Why would you recover that? I mean, I know why you would recover to figure out why did it crash in the first place, right? But that's a recovery that you can do later, kind of like, I assume that when we're talking about multi-region recovery, we need to enable those operations to be up and running, right? And why do you care about Prometheus data in that new cluster?
In which case, what I would say is, like, if you don't care and this is really the only data services and it's all of that, and you are okay with not having it on the other side, what I would do is take all that stuff and just do Valero backups every 5 minutes. Just have Valero backups every 5 minutes, throwing to an S3 bucket, and you're good. Because if you do need to restore, you can restore from there. It's going to take longer than Portworx DR, right? Portworx DR is going to be a very quick boom. It's because the data is always replicated. But if you don't need that instantaneous recovery, something like Valero, open source, that's just throwing up to an S3 bucket, it's going to be much cheaper. It's free, right? Except for the storage in S3, which is cheap. Like, that may be your right solution.
Yeah, but don't even, I mean, it's doesn't matter, but if you need a new operational cluster, Prometheus is irrelevant. I mean, you need it to figure out why it didn't work, kind of like, yeah, Valero, kind of, why would you do something other than that? For Prometheus, again, if you're talking about user data, that's tough. Then your first answer kind of is 100% valid in those cases, right?
Right.
But now we're talking about user data, not metrics, kind of. Who cares about new cluster is up and running? That's what really matters, and your users can continue using that cluster, right?
Exactly.
Okay. From Burunkal, what do you think about Atlantis and Terraforming Git PRs? I don't use Terraform for years now. I don't know. I don't know about it.
Again,
I heard a lot of good things.
I still do use Terraform / OpenTofu / whatever. By the way, congrats to OpenTofu for joining the CNCF. But I personally have not had experience with Atlantis. I've heard good things, but it's never interested me enough to actually go down the rabbit hole of learning it. So, yeah, I don't have much to say on Atlantis personally.
Okay, there's a bunch of questions and we're out of time. Let's do two more, quick ones. Is there any course on YouTube for both KCL and Crossplane which can taught to fresher in DevOps step by step? Already seen your video, Victor. So if you've seen my video, when you say video, the 5 or 6 videos that are tutorial on Crossplane, that's it. I don't have anything like tutorial or like for KCL, and I haven't been following other people whether they have something like that. I would be surprised because KCL is not that big. What I can say is that depends how much urgency you have. I'm planning to redo all my Crossplane tutorials once Crossplane V2 becomes stable, to update them, and while doing that I'm going to switch from Go templating used over there to KCL. But I don't have any other recommendation. And I'm guessing that Scott didn't try to find KCL tutorials.
Absolutely not, nor do I have plans to, but Crossplane tutorials, I would say Victor's are good. And KCL, listen, I played with KCL. I will say it like this. It is probably one of the easier templating languages to learn.
Yes.
It was probably my least favorite templating language that I've used except for Q. But for those that connect to it, awesome, like great. I personally did not like the ergonomics of KCL. Personally,
fair enough.
Right? Which
fair
is,
enough.
But that's just a taste, right? It's like someone likes to write in Java and another person likes to write in Go and another person in Python. And I don't think any of us can say that one of those is a bad language, right? There are pros and cons of every language, but in the end, it's the choice and what the use case is and what I like to program in. Right? And I think it's the same thing, with ZSH versus Bash versus Fish. Right? Like people choose their things just based off of the ergonomics and what they like. KCL for me, I just did not connect to it at all, and therefore I am not continuing with it. But I recommend you to try it because it is easy to get started, easy to learn, relative to templating languages. Right? It's not easy. It's easy relative to a template language.
To me, there are two important questions. Usually people start doing some deep analysis. To me, it's two things, and you said one of those two. First is whether does that language do what it needs to do for a given problem, right? Like, I think that Go templating is out of that picture simply because it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, right? It's not designed to deal with data, right? And then it's more than anything, to me, is the feeling. I don't see significant differences, honestly, between functionally between YTT, KCL, what else is there? Q, right? JSONnet. It's whatever feels better. Like, I know that there are people who love JSONnet. I had the same reaction like Scott had. It just didn't feel right. And if somebody asks me why do you dislike JSONnet, I have no other answer than it doesn't feel right. There is no real answer to that question, at least not for me, right? Okay, Johnny, thank you so much for $5. Another from Hussein. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And I think that we are out of time. Still unanswered questions. See you probably next week. I need to check my calendar. I might be traveling. Otherwise, see you next week. Take care. Cheers.
Bye.
Okay, this time I remembered not to press the end stream button before Scott says bye because I got complaints that I was cutting you off.